Grab a chair.
Yeah, we are live. So, are you ready to say anything?
All right. We are live and we are now going to start our community conversation. If anyone's coming in the door, just feel free to walk in, just grab a chair where you can. My name is Julianne Brienza. I'm the Executive Director of Capital Fringe. I'm also the curator for our Down to Earth program and exhibit that is currently running in the Caandor Gallery here in Anacostia, and it'll be up through the 14th. Part of the program was a lot of investigation and building a knowledge base and learning from community advocates in order to create the artwork that is in the exhibit. And through that process, we all became very somewhat educated, some more than others, about the cleanup process of the Kenilworth Park and the history of the way the land has been moved around, used, abused, basically starting, almost, with the program it went back to 12,000, we started in 12,000 BC and went to current day. So today with us we have three of the community advocates that helped educate us. And they're going to introduce themselves and then we're going to get started into our conversation. So you want to go ahead, Justin?
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Justin Leaney, Chair of the Board for Friends of Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. Our organization supports the aquatic gardens through stewardship, cultural, and other activities. Before I was Chair of the Board, I was a community advocate for a number of years. I live in the neighborhood of Kenilworth Park side, which is right along Kenilworth Park, affected by the historical landfill issues and the river cleanup. I was an advisory neighborhood commissioner for 4 years between 2016 or 2015 and 2019. And during that time, I got deeply involved with environmental advocacy, particularly around the cleanup at Kenilworth Park, and also climate resilience work. That's really all I got.
That's good, Justin. Dennis?
Yes, well, hello everyone. My name is Dennis Chestnut, and I am a board member of the Friends of Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens as well. And I'm also a lifetime resident of Washington, D.C. and the far northeast neighborhood in the vicinity of where the Kenilworth Park, Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens is located. I have a long history with the Kenilworth Park site and the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, of course. And it goes all the way back to my early childhood. So my experiences definitely tie in to the past, but also the present and future that I'm looking forward to seeing as the transition from some of the derelict situations that has existed with the Kenilworth Park and also the Anacostia River in particular. I look forward to being able to see the next generation enjoy this wonderful resource that we have in our community, and I'm looking forward to sharing today with you.
My name is Trey Sherrod. I'm the Anacostia River Keeper. I'm also currently the chair of the Anacostia Watershed Community Advisory Committee. I'm also an 8-year resident of Northeast, past 5 years in Kingman Park, so about 8 minutes walk from Kingman Island. And I'm really, really happy to be able to have this, share part of this conversation and to have been part of this exhibit. This is my work, but it's also something I care about really, really, really passionately. I've had the pleasure of working with Justin and Dennis Done it for 10.5 years, the whole time I've been in DC, basically, in some form or another. And with Justin, we sat on the community advisory group for the Pepco Benning Road cleanup site. And we've been involved together on a lot of the advocacy, louder in public and also behind the scenes, trying to figure out how to strategize and get their results out of the Park Service in the district, specifically for Kenilworth Park North.
So one of the things as I began this project that has taken place over the last year and 8 months that I educated myself about was actually the climate crisis and how it would really affect Ward 7. And one of the things that became alarming to me and then became even more alarming as I shared it with other community members and they're not really knowing that this was coming our way was with the mapping project on Climate Central, which is a watchdog organization that has these great maps for really the whole planet that shows flooding and shorelines changing from 2030, 2040, and 2050. In using that map, I saw that the Kenilworth Gardens it was all red, which red indicates, a change in the shoreline or flooding. And that, became very alarming to me, which then I sort of led myself to learn more about the dump that was there. And the federal government is currently going through a capping process. And so I thought if we wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about the past of how the Kenilworth Marsh was kind of used, sort of what we did in our writing. We wrote an article together, so we had a writing exercise that course, or I guess you could call it a writing exercise. Just talk a little bit about the past. So whoever wants to take the lead on that, maybe Dennis.
Dennis tells the story so much better than
Yeah,
anyone else.
Dennis tells the story really well.
Yeah, well, I guess I've been around a little longer than these guys, so I do have some stories. And facts tell, but stories sell. So I'm really trying to get that across to the audience this morning. As I said, I grew up in that community, and some of my earliest memories are, some mixed bag. I remember the dump, of course. If you lived in that particular area, you couldn't avoid the experience of living with the dump that the city municipal dump that had a process of burning the trash that was dumped and accumulated there. So it impacted the entire area. I also have memories of being a child, young person, with this vast natural resource, and I call that a natural resource, the Anacostia River in the park area, within walking distance of where I live. And so it was both, a challenging situation, but at the same time, it was really a big part of why I'm engaged and have passion for the work that I have been doing and still engaged with and advocating for now. So I have, many memories of how experiences that I had, such as I learned to actually swim right at the mouth of the Anacostia River, where Watts Branch and the Anacostia converge. There were reasons for that. I won't get into a lot of the details, but there was not a swimming pool in the vicinity of where I lived, and I like to always context things for the audience that is hearing this. And you have to keep in mind that this was in the early 1950s when the political structure here in Washington, D.C. was quite different from what it is now. There was no representative government for residents who lived in Washington, D.C. And it was even more impactful for those residents who lived east of the Anacostia River, who were marginalized, in many ways, just as all of the residents who lived in DC was. But because that particular community was comprised of a large population of poor people, people of color, and it was treated as such by the powers that be at the time in the city. The city was a federal district, which it still is now, but there was a home rule. Home rule came in the late 1970s that gave the city its first elected representation, mayor, city council, and really the first elected body in Washington, D.C. As a result of home rule was being able to elect a school board. And so that experience actually is part of what you have to keep in mind when you think of the Kenilworth Park area, the Anacostia River, and areas that are presently Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens and the rest. So I'll leave it at that right now as far as that part of it is concerned. As it relates to what we were discussing about climate change, which is very key and important, Ward 7, here in Washington, D.C., there's floodplain. We're located within floodplain, and that's something I would recommend that folks really try to acquaint themselves with so they can understand it. And one of the things that means, just simply, is that the area is at risk of flooding under extreme weather conditions. So, and the a real thing to focus in on is that 87%, at least 87% of the residential properties that are located within the floodplain, 100-year floodplain, is located in Ward 7, and primarily, mostly it's far northeast part of Ward 7. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we receive these extreme weather events, and the impact of climate change will definitely create flooding in the Kenilworth Park area and other communities located in reasonable proximity to Anacostia River and Kenilworth Park.
Do you have anything you want to add, Justin?
Yeah, regarding climate change, our marshes and wetlands function as shock absorbers for this rain under normal circumstances. In a sense, with climate change, they're also a bit of a canary in the coal mine, because they're the lowest spaces and they're immersed periodically with water, or in some cases all the time. We should be really, what happens to Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens happens to the rest of the district not long after. So you're right to sort of raise the alarm on that particular issue, both because the gardens are a treasure, but also because they're the best warning sign we have to take action to mitigate, to reduce harm, especially to our communities in northern Ward 7 along Watts Branch. They're not only the most vulnerable to climate change impacts, but they're also the most vulnerable communities, some of the most vulnerable communities we have in the District of Columbia, period.
And I wanted to jump us back, Julian, you started about the exhibit going back thousands of years, and even just going back 150 years, what is now Kenilworth Park, formerly Kenilworth Dump, was formerly Kenilworth Marsh. And the little piece that's still Kenilworth Marsh on the maps outside of the lily ponds at Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, the thing you can see from the boardwalk, is a teeny tiny fraction of what was there. If you're on the bike trail and you're moving upriver, that high part that you come down, it's really skinny before you take the hard turn and you come across the bridge and you can see into the marsh there. That used to be an island. And the other inlet for the water to come around was down where Kenilworth Park, north and south meet now, Watts Branch. So it's interesting to think that, now the only island on the river is Kingman Island, and it wasn't there 120 years ago as an island. But islands that used to be there are gone, and they're now part of a high part is the bike trail. Those wetlands do a lot of things. They are not just habitat, they're not just refuge and food for a lot of living things that we would like to have more of coming back into the district. but they are a sponge and they are a filter. So they're the kidneys and liver of the river. And we've cut out almost all, the great majority, like 90-some% of the wetlands. And that's as of now, after 2 decades of a lot of active restoration work. At one point, we were down to like single digits. That part that used to be Kenilworth Marsh, some of that could become marsh again. And there's actually plans afoot by the district trying to talk about that. But those marshes, they're spongy. There's a lot of plants. And every single plant you see is a water pump.
Let's actually say like that. Like what do the wetlands do? Like what does it do? Because one thing that I probably had learned at some time in my life, but I didn't grow up somewhere where we had wetlands. I grew up in Montana, so we didn't have a lot of wetlands. But how they really deal with pollution.
So they filter it, the plants filter it, the sediment catches it. But with water in particular, when we're talking about flooding and climate change, every single one of those plants, you see their grasses, they don't take a lot of room this way, right? When you look out from the boardwalk, you see thousands, if not millions of them in just a small patch. Every single one of them is a water pump. And they're pumping water 9 or 10 months a year, all day long. And that's the kind of thing we need when we're talking about getting more and more rain more and more quickly, especially in a city where we've got so much hard and impervious surface causing a lot of runoff.
Yeah.
And then all the pollutants that come in, those plants are really capable, a lot of them very highly capable of locking up different metals and toxics, and often not even in the parts that we want to eat. I found out recently. It's pretty cool. But they do an immense amount of work that we don't see and that most people don't know that they're doing for them. Most people just see, oh, there's a marsh. Some people see, well, gee, I wish I could get across that faster. Some people like the birds and the animals and the things that are there. But a lot of people don't realize all of the very important things for us and our health that those plants are doing because of that kind of wetland habitat. When we're talking about the past, getting ourselves back, not all the way to the past, but bringing back some of the best things from it, like having more wetlands here, is tremendously important.
So with the Kenilworth North remediation process that is happening, let's just sort of outline where we are in the process of this. It's called the CERCLA process. That's the federal government's term for it. Where we are in that process so that people who may watch this or those here today that may not be familiar with where we are in that process, so they can kind of know what may be the expectation once it is remediated. Because once the Kenilworth North Park is remediated by the federal government, it will get transferred back to DC, and DC will be the caretaker per se of that land once, I guess, again, or who had it before the federal government? Nobody?
Gosh dang.
Yeah, the Native Americans.
Yeah, the Native Americans had it before the federal government.
Yeah.
The Anacostia Indian, Native American tribe inhabited that area, the area along the Anacostia River. So the federal government was the initial entity that had authority over what is now Kenilworth Park and Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. And the remediation process is something that's necessary as a result of what the federal government was responsible for putting on that particular land. That municipal dump, that landfill, and you think about it, it started, they opened that landfill back in the early 1940s, it might have been 1940, and that landfill existed there for, a little over 30 years. And during that period of time, everything that had to be discarded in the city, municipal waste, went to that site. And so therefore, the land was made into a toxic wasteland, so to speak. And then on top of that, you consider that the open burning that took place as a way of what they call getting rid of the trash. It really didn't get rid of it. It wound up leaching into the soils as well as the river. And I like the way that Justin described the area. It's kind of like a canary in the mine. Well, you know, one of the things that as relates to the Anacostia River that has been studied, that has been part of the studies that have taken place to lead us to the place where we are, is the impact that all of that had on the sub-aquatic life, and especially the bottom feeder sub-aquatic life, catfish, for example. And I mean, you know, there are a lot of things that I know Trey can discuss in detail about the kinds of things that was able to be discovered from the catfish. And what you have to keep in mind is that being a waterway in the city, there are people still right now and that fish and consume fish that they catch in the Anacostia River. And some of the conditions of the fish as a result of the contaminants and polluted state that was created in the Anacostia River was evident in the cancerous lesions and other kinds of physical impacts that it had on those on that sub-aquatic life. And like I said, especially the catfish being the bottom feeder, meant that they were feeding primarily in the sediment, where some of the worst things that we can consider were located. And so this it's one of those things that, yes, the city is going to receive authority over Kenilworth Park North at a point after it's been remediated. And right now, we're in a condition where we've been adapting in various ways to what exists there. But the real goal, long-term, the bigger goal, is to remediate that area and hopefully turn it into some productive use for the local community who lives and borders the Kenilworth Park area here in the city. That they'll be able to, it'll be an amenity of some kind that will really finally serve as some kind of benefit for the community.
Justin, you want to go next?
Yeah, I would say to sort of build off what Dennis was saying about benefit for the community. I know we're still working our way through the decision-making process. I think, do you have a record of decision right now on it?
So I actually just reached out to Park Services person like a week ago, and the update is that the record of decision, which was done internally at Park Service, was in January of this year, has passed through whatever their, took almost 3 months of intra-agency review. It should be done there soon, hopefully. It'll go to DOE, the District Department of Energy and Environment. Supposedly that should only take a few weeks, maybe a month, and then it goes back to Park Service to move up and down and around through Department of Interior for signatures. And apparently that process may take up to 6 months just to get it signed. So maybe this fall for a document that was substantively done 3 months ago.
Yeah,
On a project that's been going on for longer than I've been in DC, over a decade.
Longer than almost 20 years, I think, when the conversations first started on it. I was, one of the things I think I want to say for community members and everyone who's interested in advocating on these issues is these are all long campaigns. So although you may have missed an opportunity to engage on something before, no doubt there will be another opportunity to engage again in the future because this process has been going on since the early 2000s. And I guess after that record of decision was out, do they open that up for comment again? Or is the venue moving on to
I forget right now.
DOE?
So can I jump into framing the whole circle thing?
Oh, yeah.
So Julian used the acronym CIRCLA, and I'm not going to break that out for you because I misplaced 2 of the 6 letters. just now in my head trying to
You
practice
could
it.
probably Google it.
It is basically the Superfund law. And so Superfund is what it sounds like. It's a super big fund of money because these kinds of toxic sites with multiple inputs, with decades of different kinds of pollution, especially once you've been set it on fire and mix it up with the rain and the dirt. Park Service has capped it a couple times already. So before this proposed cap we're talking about right now. So Superfund is what the federal government has as a revolving fund to get the studies done to see how much of which chemicals are where. That part is called a remedial investigation in RI. So that's the investigation into what you're gonna need to remediate for cleanup. And that's how much of which chemicals at what concentrations in the dirt, in the fish, in the bugs, in the birds, in the mammals, in the deep mud, in the water between the mud, all of the different media of that site. We don't usually talk about air. In this case, there were definitely harms to air, but those were done way a long time ago. So that's the first part. It's a big, expensive technical study. Superfund fronts that money. In this case, it's not running through the Superfund itself. The district and Park Service have been talking about how to move this money forward. I don't know what the split is, but they've been talking about how to cost share, and I think both have been chipping into the studies. So the next part is then the FS, the feasibility study. And once you know how much of what is where, now you look at your options for cleanup, for remedial actions, and how much those might cost, how quickly they might work, how effective they would be for reducing harm to humans, for reducing harm to the entire rest of the environment, since we like to separate ourselves out. And that's the feasibility study, so how feasible are the different solutions? And cost is a factor, so is community input. And then they take that, and there's gonna come out the record of decision, the ROD that we were talking about. And so that ROD becomes the legally binding instrument, which forces the parties, the potentially responsible parties, is the phrase you usually hear, because nobody wants to claim actual liability. They'll say, okay, well, we'll pay for this, but it's not necessarily our fault. This is how those settlements usually shake out. So the potentially responsible parties will then fund the cleanup, and this will be the remedial action. In this case, what Park Service wanted to fund is capping, even though they've tried capping at this site 2 or 3 times in the past, and there were still toxics moving up and out of the site. Capping is a lot cheaper than digging out all that old toxic ash and sludge and sediment pretty deep at this point, especially in the south side. We're focused on the north side, so north of Watts Branch, where the big rugby and soccer fields are. So what we've advocated for, and I think successfully with the district, is that the district, including the District Department of Energy and Environment, sent their comments, and they matched a lot of the advocates' comments, asking Park Service not to cap certain parts of Kenilworth Park North, especially right along the bank of Watts Branch and right along the bank of the Anacostia River. Because what we don't want is for the federal government to pay to put fresh dirt on top of a site that we would like the district government, when they take management, not ownership, but management of the site, following that capping. We don't want them to have to go back and spend more public money to dig down through publicly funded dirt to get down and then put a wetland edge back, which is what a lot of the community wants to see. So this remediation process is actually going to be in 2 more steps. So the Park Service is coming up with their ROD and firming it up and getting signatures. The district will have their chance to comment again on the actual ROD itself. That's what's happening in the next month or 2. Signatures for the rest of the summer and fall, it sounds like, from Park Service and Department of Interior. And sometime this fall or into 2023, would expect to see Park Service mobilize a contractor and actually come out and cap the parts of the park that they are going to move forward with capping on. Then the district gets control of the site, and then we would see more public input, but this time to the district, to DOE for cleanup, and to the Department of Parks and Rec for future uses of the site, and then it'll come out from there. So like they were saying, you definitely haven't missed all the opportunities to be involved. I don't think there's a comment period on the ROD for us, the general public, that happened already. Could be wrong, but there will be a lot of public input remaining for the district, and there's a little bit of public opportunity for oversight of the project itself as it's going forward.
Once it goes into the district side of things, my sense is it'll be much easier to participate in the engagement process, since you're really only working with district agencies as opposed to federal and district agencies.
And much more responsive to district residents, because they have to be,
right.
they are our agencies.
Right. So as a resident of the community, I am excited about the potential processes opening up to really talk about wetland restoration and what sort of recreational facilities work for that site for the community. What we have now, the Park Service put in, if you get further from the neighborhood, the Park Service put in the 1970s, and they mow grass and haven't really had a lot of funding to do much with it since. But it's a heavily used area for track events, for soccer games, so there's a lot of potential there.
I guess I have a question. Is it safe to do recreational sports on it? Just,
As far as I know, yes.
Okay.
So, you shouldn't take little kids there often because little kids are very prone to a little bit grabbing the dirt
yeah.
and eating it. And the dirt is where the risk is. So when we talk about the toxics, these are old metals. Think of metal, picture what trash looked like in the 40s and the 50s, and it wasn't plastic yet.
Right.
Which is good, because plastic is its own whole set of poisons. Plastic is oil, in case anybody doesn't know. It's oil, just shaped different. But everything was ceramic, so wood fell apart for the most part, or got preserved. Metal corroded or stayed in big chunks. The really scary thing in the Kenilworth dump, now Kenilworth Park, and frankly the really scary thing up and down the Anacostia are PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. And they were an insulator, they were a miracle chemical in the late 1800s when we started to electrify everything, because they could insulate and oil machinery that needed to be electrified without short-circuiting it. And they could take really high heat. They were really tough chemicals. We made them awesome. All of the ones that have been made are still around. They were only made for a little under 80 years or so before we banned them in the 70s. But they're all still there. And they were in all of those appliances that were thrown away in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s early 70s before the landfill closed. So those chemicals, there's hundreds of those type of chemical. They cause a lot of birth defects in humans, not extra finger, short finger, but learning disability, behavioral disability, lifelong. And that can happen to a child born to a mother who hasn't even eaten the fish from the river in a long time, but she ate it at some point and it never left her body. These chemicals move intergenerationally, which is really scary. But in the environment, as far as just someone encountering it, you have to eat, just an unbelievable amount of dirt that was very contaminated to get sick from that. What happens for people getting sick is that it moves up the food chain, and the worms eat it all the time and live in it. The little fish eat the worms, the big fish eat thousands of little fish, right? That each ate hundreds of worms, and you build that pyramid up until you get to a person that's eating a subsistence anyway, that's eating a catfish every week, maybe 2 or 3 catfish every week, depending on how hard they're relying on the river for secure protein, or what they think is secure protein, but actually isn't in this case. That's where you see the really severe health impacts, or the community of people that are getting fish from the guy that goes to get it, right? There's a really dense, really amazing social food sharing network. People like to share food, people like to provide for their neighbors. But in this case, some of that fish is actually toxic, and what they're providing is not necessarily good for them. And some people don't know that, or some people haven't heard it from a source that they believe in. And it's become a problem that's pretty widespread in the district. But as far as actually playing on the field, that's fine. Foot recreation, that's mostly fine. There's some concerns about what leaches out, and if it's moving in the groundwater around people's homes. There are some concerns about.
Well, that's been like my thought when I look at how the flooding is going to just become more, just happen more, more. I want to say more often, but that's not really correct. But much more frequently. And so I in all of the interactions I've had, whether it be Zoom, federal government, we all sat on that Zoom. I just wonder if, I can't believe they're not thinking 20, 30, just considering how long the process has taken, thinking 20, 30 years ahead to the way that it is a tidal river as well, and how, especially the capping that's already happened, and that's something that I want, as we go into these different parts of the remediation process where we have community input specifically with our local government, that is brought forth.
That's a big one, because
Yeah.
if you cap it, and you cap it the right way, assuming our guess is about 30 years from now are right, and you engineer to that, great. You know, maybe that part of the river, when the river is way bigger, will be calm. But if you guess wrong, or if the engineering's wrong, and you cap it, and then it gets uncapped, you know, we spent a lot of money to solve the problem for 5 or 10 or 20 years only to have it come back.
Yeah.
And a lot of these toxic sites were marshes. This was not unique to this community. It's a huge, devastating impact to this community, but it is not unique to this community. A lot of communities of color, a lot of communities where people are poor, however they find the political voice at the time, that's where the dumps went. And those dumps are all full of the same things. And they are usually low points, they're usually marshy, wet ground that nobody wanted to use for something else. And they are all very subject to climate change as we talk about flooding coming up. And so this is a worldwide problem, frankly, with how our toxic sites are placed, and the fact that they are all going to be getting flooded if they're not already being flooded regularly.
One other thing, while I didn't want this point to slip by us when you were asking about, how safe it is for someone to use the grounds over there to play soccer and other kind of recreation. And Trey described it, very well, what a child would have to do in order for it to impact them severely. But I was at another recreation center to support some of my nephew's children. They were playing football, on Saturday morning over at our Deanwood Recreation Center, which is just on the other side of 295 from Kenilworth. And what I observed, really shocking to me, was these children, these young children, the younger ones, not the ones out on the football field that were playing, but the younger ones that were around on the edges, on the sidelines. And this field is an artificial turf field. And all of this, it breaks down. You get all these little small black colored plastics, and they were playing in it like it was sand. I was pulling my nephew's coattails and say, hey, one of the things that people can do that's very important right now. So I was just saying that to say that that's a more toxic situation than them playing in that area over in Kenilworth Park. They would have to really be digging and turning it over and doing it with both handfuls, But those artificial turf fields, this has been something that's come up, it's kind of subsided, because I guess they get these things so many places. But that's a real issue, so that's another kind of toxicity. So I didn't want to let that pass, but at the same time, this is why it's very important for the community to come informed and to understand as much as can be understood about this whole process, all things related to it. Because while all of the other parts of the process are taking place and are moving, there are other things that will be very important, to be done that the community can do with whatever limited control they have themselves. Resilience is a word that comes to mind for me. And this is a time for the local community that borders, the Anacostia River and Watts Branch, and we can even go as far as the other tributaries in the city, like Oxen Run, which is on the southern end of the city in Ward 8. This is a time for really building resilience and doing the things that can be done while this process is underway. And then the better informed the community is, the more action that they will be in position to take through being informed about, all things related. So I'm just, this is a plug. I'm really recommending to the community to really try to inform themselves, become acquainted with it, know as much about it, take action. The actions that that people will be able to take. I remember a situation where I spoke about the Deanwood Recreation Center Library that was built. It's a fairly new facility, built several years ago. It was much needed, honestly, and as far as the community is concerned. But there was a small recreation center and swimming pool that had been built previously over in the Kenilworth neighborhood. People refer to that area as the Eastland Gardens Kenilworth area. And I can remember sitting in meetings, and the community in the Eastland Gardens neighborhood were really adamant about getting a new recreation center. Their recreation center was an older era recreation center. Well, I was advocating, I wouldn't say advocating, but I was trying to recommend to the community to, I thought that was, you want to have a recreation center, even though the Kenilworth Rec is a recreation center, it's like a regional center for all of the communities there. Rather than try to tear down that smaller recreation center in the Eastland Gardens area, I was recommending remodel, improve, maybe go up a level and do things that way. Because I was really, I'm not the scientist, but I am a builder. And I was recommending that if you tear that recreation center down, in order to build a new recreation center, you would have to go into putting in footings and all kinds of other things that go in, infrastructure that would have to go into building that kind of a facility. And I told them, I said, that will not happen, especially with the expense and all that will go into remediating the area in order to be able to do that. I was, unsuccessful in my recommendations, and the recreation center was torn down, and the swimming pool was closed down, and it has been that way since that happened. The city council member and the mayor were trying to satisfy the community and say, hey, that's what you want, that's what we want to do, we're going to tear it down, and you all get a new recreation center. They have a new recreation center, but it's attached to an elementary school that existed in the community that's not far from there, which is, good. But this is just an example of what I was discussing just a little earlier, and that is, it's really important for the community to be informed. Some people use the term educated, but I say informed and educated, so that we understand all aspects of it and can move to take the proper actions as a result of being in this community.
Yeah, I think to build off of that, I think one thing that communities really bring to these processes is, if we look at Anacostia River, there are a number of projects to clean up parts of the river, and projects come and go. They may take a long time, but the community is there longer, and I think when a community is informed, they can really help pull all this stuff together. And one of the things I thought, in my experience as being an advocate in the community, was you could achieve wonderful things when you could get the technical people to sit down and listen to the community people and have a conversation where they both could start to understand each other. I think the outcomes of that, I witnessed it on many occasions, the outcomes of that was just so much better than what any of them would have come up on their own. And I think in the case, we got to bring in these questions about resilience, these questions about climate change, because they may not get asked otherwise. And people in the community, when they're paying attention, they know how these things affect them. And that's a form of expertise and knowledge that I think from the outside of the community, you can't really get. So that's kind of my sense about it.
I want to hit on that the third time, just because resiliency doesn't have to be marshes, right? It doesn't have to be levees or walls. Resiliency it's all the things, right? It is also the community knowing how to ask for what they want, who to ask for what they want to actually get traction. There's a lot more to being informed than just facts. It's knowing the power structure. It can be power mapping. It can be keeping track of that every time the ANCs change. Sometimes you have to link it to ANC and then it leaves, and you have to find out what the new ANCs are up to and what they care about. But that idea of resiliency in people and in the community cannot be mentioned enough. It's a huge one, and you see it. It solves some of the worst problems in Kenilworth. Kenilworth used to be a burn dump, and before it was district government, it was federal government that I was just talking about, and it was a commission of 3 people that Congress put in charge, appointed, no public input. People from all the other states got to elect Congress, and Congress chose 3, usually white guys, to put in charge of the district. And that was the district government. And that was who allowed the municipal dump for what was in a federally run city to be put on federal property at Kenilworth. And they decided it was a good idea to burn the trash because the only people that were downwind were either poor and or people of color. Until it took a boy dying to solve that because they were not listening to the community at that point. The district government.
Calvin Mock.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we all know what an ANC is, because you never know. It's an area neighborhood commission.
Advisory.
Oh, sorry, advisory. What did I say? Area? Advisory neighborhood commission. There are all over the city. If you are not familiar with them, you could literally just Google ANC Washington DC and then find the ward that you live in. And it's a great. You can look up their minutes online. So if you don't have the time to actually go or sit on the Zoom, they're typically very long meetings. But it's a really great way to just get your toes into maybe something that you're interested in your community and learning, kind of how to advocate, starting to see familiar names. That's a great first step. What is another step with the remediation of the Kenilworth North Park and what we've been talking about today besides ANCs? It's a great way for people to get their toes into learning and advocating about these issues.
So in addition to the ANCs, there's also all the civic associations that are at the neighborhood scale and not just split out by population density per ward of the ANCs. That's another good monthly meeting. You should find out which commission, which citizen association you're in, and pay attention to those. The district funds free boat tours. I give a lot of those. Go and come out. We're waiting for the grant to close, but sometime late April, early May, we'll start giving tours again. But that's funded with bag fee money from the district, and it's an opportunity for people to see the river, physically get on the river on a boat for free, and we talk about all these things, and people bring their questions. A lot of those tours go by Kenilworth. We can spend a lot of time talking about it there. There is the Anacostia River Sediment Project. I think it's now under restoretheanacostia.com or something similar. There's the bibliography that y'all been pulling together for this project.
Yeah, we have as part of this program, I did because it's honestly, there's so much to learn. So I actually put together a bibliography that's broken down into sections. There's a soil section, and that is at capitalfringe.downtoearth.org, and you can it's also on the wall over here if you want to scan it, if that's easier, but you can find it there.
In terms of getting involved, I can tell you what my story was, because I came to the Parkside neighborhood with my wife, who's sitting in the audience here, in 2013, and I didn't know anyone in the neighborhood. I was new. I was a white person in a 99% black community. But I wanted to get to know my neighbors. I wanted to get to know my community. So what I did is I went on, I sort of dug around and found out we had a civic association. And I was like, I'll go to the civic association, go to the meeting, and I'll get to know some of my neighbors and find out what's going on. And I went there and met everyone, and it was a wonderful experience. So those community organizations are really good places to go to get started. But what happened was they found that I had some spare time and volunteered me to go to ANC meetings and these other things. And before long, I was being recruited to serve as an advisory neighborhood commissioner. And the point is that communities are always looking for people to get involved. There's always more work to do than you've got people to do it. You don't have to hold an officer position. You don't have to hold a title anywhere. I have a friend in the neighborhood who passed away last year, Greg Rett, and he always told me, titles don't make leaders. So, get involved, step up, help your neighbors, and that's how I got involved. And then you learn about other opportunities to get involved, and you get connected to how information flows to the community. So, but you have to be there, you have to be present, you have to be open to your neighbors. And I think that's also, when we talk about resilience in communities, these organizations are your grassroots ways to sort of build that resilience. It's those relationships. I used to volunteer for the Red Cross, and I would go to house fires. And you could tell how resilient the community was by how people would be out there engaging with the people affected by the fire. When I came to Ward 7, what I would see is the community would kind of gather around their people who were, were going through the situation, and they would help each other out. They'd support each other. One of the reasons why I came to the neighborhood that I did. So resilience, it starts with these really basic, simple little building blocks, like going to a meeting, getting to know people, finding out how you can help each other.
Well, I think also something that I've learned in community advocacy work, not just specifically around this project, but throughout my life, is that you don't often see the end result. And that isn't often the point of it. And if you have been hearing what we've been talking about today, this process has been going on, I mean, sometime out of our lifetime, we've been here, the way the land has been used. But every little bit helps if we are able to, raise your voice and help. I just want to take a moment to see if anyone that's here has something they want to say, or if they have a question. We do have a mic because we're live streaming, so Graham can kind of help maybe pass it around. No one needs to say anything. I just wanted to open it up in case someone had a question or something they wanted to. Just a lot of eyes looking at me. Okay. All right. Well, we are actually almost at a full hour of this wonderful discussion, so I think we did a great job, right?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
Do either of you have anything else you'd like to share?
Well,
Or give voice to?
yeah, well, I would like to actually, and it's just pretty much reinforcing a lot of what was said about Trey and Justin, and especially about the community engaging and getting involved. There's so much legacy that exists from the involvement and engagement from the community over in the areas we're discussing. And all of it is a part of what, as you so astutely stated, you don't always see the end result, the final outcome. But I think that, there's really no such thing as a real final outcome, that it's just an evolving thing that continues to take place over time. I think about the home where I live. It's the home that I grew up in, so I've been in that home. Only for a short time. I was away from the time I graduated from high school and went away to college and came back, get married and start a family. And then in 1980, I wound up back in that home. And that home was one time heated with a coal furnace. And now, we have a whole different kind of HVAC and air conditioning, things I didn't grow up with. So the same thing with, our situation with the Kenilworth Park, Kenilworth landfill, in that area, and the river, the one I learned to swim in, that became polluted, but is now really in the process of becoming fishable and swimmable within a very short period of time. I think that I may see that in my lifetime. I see all of that as parts of why it is important for the community to come together and learn with one another and from one another, and hold those people who we put in positions of authority. I wouldn't say leadership. A lot of times I'm more of a leader than the people we put in authority. But those people who we put in authority, hold their feet to the fire, because I want everybody to walk away. If I say one thing I want you to walk away with, and I really say this to a lot of folks when I talk to them, I say, really remember that is our money, our resources that they're working with to do whatever is done. And I want to have a good say in how my money is spent and how it's used, especially as it relates to things that impact, my community. So, thank you very much. This has been
All
exciting.
right, so the Down to Earth exhibit is here at the Han Floor Gallery at 1241 Good Hope Road through the 14th of April. And we also have various events going on. Specifically, on April 23rd, we will be doing an Earth Day cleanup at the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. It starts at 9 a.m. You do need to RSVP, which you can find that on the Capitol Fringe site. And then we're going to hang out in the park. And if you happen to be watching this live stream, maybe after the time that April 2022 has passed, a great way to kind of dip your toes into kind of understanding what it really means to kind of take care of a river in this type of city, urban environment. Great things to do are to do the riverboat tours that the Anacostia River Keeper does. Also, the Friends of Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens does a lot of cleanups, and you can find that information if you just Google Friends of Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. I have done one. I'm going to do the one on Earth Day, and it is utterly surprising, or maybe not. After I did it, I was like, this is logical. Just how many plastic bottles you're pulling out, and like, if there's anything as a resident of a city that you can do, never purchase water in plastic bottles. It is literally illogical in the 21st century.
And talking about raising your voice, mention to your council member how you feel about plastic bottles, mention to the mayor, at Mayor Bowser, or whatever her tag is on your platform of choice for social media. Take a picture when you're on the river trail of the bottles piled up. Take a picture when you're in the park of the bottles piled up. They are 60% of the weight of all of the trash floating on the river at any given time. Over half of the trash on the river that's floating is just plastic bottles, which seems like a really sweet political opportunity, but it's one that no one has chosen to take yet.
And it doesn't go away, it stays there.
Yeah, all of that is here after we have all gone away. That was all right. Well, I want to thank all of you, like our panelists, for being here today, and also for all of your time and knowledge that you have shared over the course of the program. It's been really meaningful, and it's not just helped me, but it's helped a lot of the artists, which we have our summer artist here today, Siobhan. I know that she was grateful for the advice and knowledge shared, and thanks to everyone that came out today. All right, happy Earth Month! All right.
That's a wrap.
We did it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for, I really appreciate you guys coming. nice.
No, that's good. No, we didn't.
This is good to have up and share it,
Right.
do things with it.
Educate bottle again.
Yeah.
That's really.
Also balls.
Balls, so balls are like the number 3 category. Bottles, foam, balls. By way.
Balls.
So when groundwork was maintained in the litter traps, and we were taking out a lot of that.
Sweet. Yeah.
And one of the things that we had our team do, a team effort that was doing a cleanup.
Not that I'm unsure.
We would take the balls, and then we would do a second cleanup of the balls. And we would take them and distribute them to schools and we started recreation centers. But we would also check with the school and the elementary schools and see if they could use some free, and we would pump them up so they were nice and.
Yeah.
But we